This is the Holga 60mm f8 lens. This is by far the worst performing lens I have ever used, but that's exactly what it's meant for. In this video we're talking about this little piece of plastic right here, the Holga 60mm f8 lens. So just by looking at it, you can tell that this is a cheap lens. This is basically a few what looks to be 3D printed pieces of plastic with a piece of glass in between them. And this lens only costs around $15 depending on what mount you get it in and where you get it from. I'm going to leave an Amazon link in the description for a few different mount variants of this depending on what camera you have. But it's safe to say this is basically the cheapest lens you can get. Now like I said, this is by far the worst performing lens I've ever used in terms of sharpness and flare reduction, chromatic aberration, and basically everything else. This lens is absolutely terrible. But that is the exact reason Holga made this lens. They weren't trying to make the best lens possible for a cheapest price. They literally designed this to be a really bad lens, but to be used for really specialized type of photos and videos. So this lens has a bunch of flaring, it lets in light leaks, it's not very sharp at all, it has a bunch of ghosting and chromatic aberration, but in the right scenarios and the right conditions, you can still get some awesome looking photos from this. So this lens is really designed to give you that vintage, like old film point and shoot type of look, and it definitely brings a vintage feel to any pictures and videos you take. But this lens is basically only meant for having fun with, for taking fun Instagram pictures, or just some really interesting photos to mess around with. This is not meant to be used for any sort of professional work or anything where sharpness and just image quality actually matters. So it's definitely a portrait focal length. However, at f8, it doesn't let in much light and there's really not any sort of background separation. And also being an f8 and not letting in a lot of light, you're gonna have to bump up your ISO, which will increase noise. However, I think this is actually a good thing for this lens because the noise added with a higher ISO really just kind of brings to life the effect that this lens portrays. And so I think the f8 aperture really doesn't mean anything, and you're gonna wanna bump up your ISO anyways to get more grain in the image and just give it more of that vintage feel. Now I think the worst part about this in my opinion is the focusing abilities. It basically just has plastic threads and two pieces that just thread together like this, and it is not smooth at all. It's actually pretty tough to turn sometimes. And I think that takes away from the experience a lot more than the bad quality glass does. You know, I think if I had the same quality glass, just this, you know, terrible looking, not sharp, really chromatic aberration-y, flary glass, but in a little bit of a better housing with smoother focus, I think that would make this a way better lens. But again, it's less than $20, so they definitely did that for a reason to keep the price down. You know, even with the same quality glass that's in this, if they put it in a metal housing with smooth focus, I'm sure it would still be like a $60 lens, which is like 5 times the price of this. Also, one thing I forgot to mention, the aperture cannot be changed, so it's stuck at f8 no matter what. You can't lower it or raise it or anything like that. So you're gonna definitely have to use your ISO or your shutter speed to change the brightness and darkness of this because it's just f8 100% of the time. And one last thing, there's also no filter threads, so you can't put any ND filters or polarizing filters or anything on the end of this, which is another little bit of a downside, but again, this is a $16 lens. It's meant to give you bad looking images, so that's totally understandable. But either way, here's some more example photos and videos I took with this lens. This is honestly a super fun lens to use, and if you have a $15 or $20 budget to get something new, something to mess around with, you might as well pick this lens up and just have some fun with it. But if you're looking to buy your first lens or just, you know, something to create good looking images with, don't even consider this lens. It's not worth it unless of course you're going for the exact look that this produces, but this lens is just really not good for anything except just messing around with and having fun with. Either way, that pretty much wraps this video up. Again, thank you so much for watching. I'm gonna link this lens down in the description. If you wanna check it out and buy it, it's less than $20, so if you have a little bit of a budget like that and you want to have some fun, definitely consider buying this lens. And stay tuned for more videos like this in the future, and I will see you in the next video.